Hey. So I got a new mic. I wonder how it sounds, but it's not for this. But I'm going to use it for this because might as well, right? Um, so I want to talk about extroverted versus introverted, and I don't have the book here. It's in the other room. But I got Jung's book about psychological types, and I've been reading through it. I got to say, Jung, he's he's very rambly. He talks about a lot of disconnected subjects, but then when he gets he gets focused, he starts talking about stuff in a really, really good way, like really, really focused way, and he brings things that are really connected to the subject. So it's hard to navigate his book, but one of the things he distinguishes is introverted and extroverted. Like, obviously he invented the terms, right? Introverted versus extroverted. So he's the one who invented the terms, and he's the one who defined it. And I think it's like really funny that these terms have been hijacked by like the big five or psychology in general. And really what he meant them to be is something completely different than what is going on, right? So like, I'm just saying from learning about introverted and extroverted from every source other than Jung, they're all saying extroverted is you have more energy, you're more lively, you like to be with people more, and introverted is you're more reserved, you're more quiet, and things like this. So Jung never says this. That's just what's really funny. He invents the term and he just never says this. The only distinctive thing between introverted and extroverted, he invented them for the functions, right? So you have the four functions, and they can either be introverted or extroverted functions. And what does that mean? It means the functions are either objective or subjective, and that's it. So if you're thinking about thought, for example, so is your thought objective thought? Is it putting objectiveness above yourself, or are you putting yourself above objectiveness, right? So that's it. That's what he defined it to be. And it's just funny that like they can be expressed in different ways, and we notice them in different ways. But this is the core definition. It's like, are your functions connected to are your functions prioritizing objective things or subjective things? And he really talks about how each function, obviously separately, all four functions, what happens when they're extroverted, what happens when they're introverted, but this is just the general thing. So we can use an example of like extroverted thinking or extroverted feeling, right? So these are both what he calls rational functions, okay? And he calls sensing and intuition irrational functions. I don't know why, but that's what he calls them, right? Well, I could venture to guess, but so the thinking and feeling functions are when they're extroverted, they're located in a somewhat social and somewhat objective way. So for example, your morality, he says, an extroverted morality is one that lines up with the morality of society, right? Whatever society is now deeming moral, that's what your morality is, because it's objective. It's trying to be objective across the board. It's trying to say, this is what morality is. Let's all agree, okay? And he says these people are going to be people who are objective and put the object before themselves are going to forget themselves. They're going to diminish themselves because they are not important. Their opinions are not important. Their own biases are not important. What's important is the subjective world where they should have no input or say over what is true or what is real, right? And so they're always trying to get rid of this subjectiveness from their lives, okay? So, and someone who's putting their self above the object is doing the opposite thing. They're putting themselves over this object, and they're saying, okay, well, what do I think about this? I don't care what you guys think. I don't care what's accepted. I want to think about it myself and figure it out for myself, right? That's what the thinking is doing. And the same thing with the values. Like, I don't care what the general values are, or the agreed upon values, or what's valued by everyone, right? I don't care about that. I care about what I value. I care about my own subjective values, right? So they would be in a superiority complex by saying that someone who's introverted is going to think they're superior and their views are superior to everyone else. And he says that if you're imbalanced, right? If you're balanced, obviously you know that, my views are my views, and I'm entitled to them, and I'm not going to impose them on other people, right? And that's the opposite of the objective people, because they think, no, this is the objective. We have to impose objectiveness on other people. So they're going to try to impose their objective truths, if they're not balanced, on other people. And the people who are introverted are going to try not to impose it and try to increase everybody's ability to be independent, right? So that's just a little introverted and extroverted blip for the thinking and feeling, and it's the same thing for intuition and sensing. So the sensing and the intuition is going to be looking at the object, looking at things that are in front of them, looking at the situation they're in, and looking at the what do you call it? Chavayot. Their experiences. Okay. So they're going to be always looking for these experiences to experience reality. They won't be able to sit still because they'll always want something new, some other stimulus, something to stimulate their experiencing. Okay, so Jung says all of these cognitive functions, they form around some part of the human experience. Okay, and he calls people types. Okay, types for him doesn't seem to be something that's healthy. A type is something when you focus and you put all of your consciousness onto one function, then you become a type, right? And today we've obviously gone a little forward and seen that, okay, you can pick two functions, and between two functions you can have a third function, and then the fourth function you're going to be more ignoring or not be there, because your consciousness is focused on one function, and the functions are designed to interact with one part of human experience. Okay, so the sensing, for example, the five senses, or the immediate surrounding and all of the different kinds of experiences. So that's the SE, right? So the SE is going to be focused on the function is going to develop around this. Okay, so it's not going to be this. Everyone has five senses, and everyone has this function that develops around the five senses in order to experience it and interpret it. But it's just their consciousness is going to be sitting on that experiencing function, the function that is experiencing the five senses and the now, right? And so same thing with the feeling. The feeling is going to be sitting on your feelings and your values. It's going to be a function that forms around your feelings. What feels right, what feels wrong, what feels good, what feels bad, all of that. So there's going to be a function that forms around this in order to interpret it, okay, in order to understand it. And then your consciousness is just going to be sitting on that function that's interpreting it all the time. And so if your consciousness is there long enough, you start to get more and more control, active control in that area. And you start to search for things, be completely in tune with it, right? So an extroverted sensing type would be completely in tune with their senses, and they'll want this part of their mind to be activated. They'll want this experiencing of the world around them to, or NE is the same thing. NE, he says, and NI, he says, is the ability to look for connections between things and possibilities in things. He really likes intuition. He tears down a lot of functions, a lot of extroverted functions, and he also he just likes to tear down the functions. But for some reason, intuition he doesn't completely tear down, because I think he has some side of, I don't know, he really values intuition. He thinks he called it the most noble of human functions or whatever. But anyway, so intuition, he thinks, he says, is this ability to see possibilities and to see connections between things. Okay, and so someone this function is going to form around this ability that we have to make connections. And if your consciousness is sitting there, it's going to be completely aware of all of these connections that you're making. And it's going to be able to actively seek out connections and look for connections and think about connections, right? And that's what it's going to be trying to do. And it's going to have a lot of value. All of its value is going to be there, right? And so so this is just the idea that these functions form around around a human experience. Your consciousness is focused on one or more of these functions, but your consciousness is mostly focused on one function. And your subconscious is going to be made up of everything that you're not conscious of, okay? So the fact that you're focusing so much, you're conscious on one function, means that you're not focusing on the rest. And it means that they're going to be still active and still doing their thing, but you're not going to be aware of their activity, and you're not going to be able to control it, and you won't be focusing on it most of your time, right? Because that's just not where your consciousness is sitting. So they're going to form this subconscious area, and the subconscious is going to try to. This is what he's saying. It's going to try to call your attention to all of the things that you're not paying attention to. It's going to form into one clump and be like, and try to draw your attention. It's going to explode. It's going to take on sort of a life of its own in order for your consciousness to expand into that area. So type for him was unhealthy. If you can type someone really easily, that means they're not a healthy and balanced person, right? For him, it's the act of ignoring. It's the act of focusing on one function and ignoring your other functions is what makes you unhealthy. And so for him, learning the functions and understanding the functions, it was linked to his own sanity and his own expanding of his own consciousness, so that he's making the subconscious less and less powerful and making the conscious more powerful. Anyway, it's getting a little bit off topic, but mainly what he was defining in his and it's really interesting that he stressed this so much, because introversion and extroversion is something that we see less in Jungian functions. We see like that the functions are pointed inwards or pointed outwards, but we don't really group them all into one thing, right? And even when we group the extroverted functions, like you see here on my thing here, so I've grouped the functions into one coin, but so you see the extroverted function, I've divided them into two, right? And so there's this extroverted pole and this introverted pole, and the introverted functions I've divided into two. So Jung doesn't do that right away. He starts with just one line, introverted and extroverted, and trying to define this term first, because it's the most distinct division for people to know if they are objective seekers to put object above self, or to put self above object, and whatever that object might be, right? So if it's an FE, the object would be people, right? If it's a SE, it would be experiences, sensing and experiences, right? So it'll put the real objective sensing and experiences above the subject, right? Even though and he attacks them a little bit, the extroverts, by saying, as if you could eliminate a subject. If there's no subject, there's nothing to experience the object, right? And he sort of laughs at the extroverts in that way, that only a sick extrovert would think that there is no subject. But so obviously there is a subject. Obviously they do, right? So an SE is just it seems to me, because I guess I have SE, but it seems to me like a very subjective experience, because you're taking things into the self, right? But I guess a true SE would be someone who is putting the experience itself above themselves, right? Trying to, I don't know, make the experience be pure and objective for some reason. If anyone could explain that to me, I'd be interested. So anyway, this is just what I was picking up. And I think I really recommend, if you're into type, reading Jung. And I'm not just because he invented it doesn't mean he's right about everything, right? Like, obviously Newton invented, well, not Newton, but Galileo invented, even before Galileo. Anyways, Newton invented a whole bunch of things in physics, but he wasn't 100% true, right? So you had to have people come after him and improve the science, right? But the thing with Jung is, it's just fascinating at how the direction of typing has strayed away from him, from just his words and his intents. Well, at least my subjective experience of those views and intents, but I just see a big difference now, like after the tree has branched off and grown and separated, so you could see where the trunk was, and you see where the branches are, and the branches seem to me at least to be a little bit far from that original trunk. So I think it's at least useful to go back and look at that. And from what I've seen, like my personal, my subjective experience of the world around me, I find that Jung is almost like 100% accurate in everything he's saying. I mean, he obviously strays on a lot of tangents, but he's the one who defines these terms, right? And like, I guess there's an objective reality that actually defines the terms, and he's just recognized it and trying to describe it, right? But in some way, his description of this objective reality is a little more accurate than just people like me who are sitting on YouTube and explaining what we think these functions are, right? Because he spent his life, like a whole, I don't remember, it might have been 20 years, I don't know, probably less, where he just went through a dry period where he didn't write anything, and what he was doing is he was investing all of his time in this type for it could have been 20 years, and then he comes out with this book after that long time. So people kind of forgot about him, like he wasn't putting anything out, and they were reading his old stuff and that stuff, and they thought he was off in some cottage retired or whatever, but he was like investing his time studying this and putting time into this. So so he might not be 100% right, but this idea of introversion and extroversion really resonates more with me than any other understanding I've seen. And it's just strange that I haven't ever seen this understanding anywhere except for like in his writings. Like, why didn't anyone ever pick this up and try to branch this off? Like, I think he's much more accurate in his description of what introverted functions are and extroverted functions are. It's just object, wherever the object is, object above self or self above object. And that's it. That's it. It's like I have almost a 20-minute video now just saying the same thing over and over again. But I hope I got the point across. Like, just anyway. Have a good one. I'm going to keep reading. I haven't finished the book, and I'm going over sections like in more depth, reading them several times, because like not that I'm not going to take it as religious dogma, right? But I am going to respect it as at least an equal and valid opinion to all of us other jokers here on YouTube. So at least that much. So yeah. Anyway, have a good one. Like and subscribe. I'm supposed to say it, so do it. And have a good one. Bye.